Jai Nitai, Jai Gour, Jai Radharaman Mahavira. Welcome to all my followers, English speakers here in Goura Sangha. Yesterday night I had the chance to speak again with Jagadananda Prabhu, teacher Acharya of Sanskrit of Jiva Institute, and who has been working in the last 12 years with Sri Satyanarayan Dasvavai Maharaj in the translations of the Sandarbhas by Jiva Goswami Pad, a very interesting devotee who hosts a blog with thousands of articles on Gaudiya Vaishnavism and Vaishnav philosophy. The conversation is 90 minutes approx, and it was so sweet, so good and interesting that I decided to share it here with you all. Here we go. God created a theater to teach Dharma. This is something that you are writing about, or something just to have an idea of what is this?
Well, yeah, so the actual statement that God created theater, actually Lord Brahma created theater. This is in the first chapter of the Bharatnatya Shastra. So Bharata is generally speaking considered the father of the dramatics, of the theory of natya, of theater. And so nearly everything goes back to Bharata. So everything, even the things that you have with Rupa Goswami, that all ultimately begins with Bharata.
All right. Yes.
So the idea with Bharata there is that that you can't communicate anything. You can't communicate an idea to another person unless there's rasa, right? Unless that magical thing called rasa happens to you, you can't really communicate anything. In other words, I can tell you, someone is stealing your car, right? So someone is stealing your car. I can tell you that, but if I don't somehow or another create fear or anger in you, then you're not going to do anything about it. So the meaning, and so this is what advertising and propaganda all follow this principle. They try to make you get upset or get angry or feel positive about some particular thing.
Yes.
And then if you get enough of those messages, then eventually your whole personality changes, and you become the thing that that the particular medium, the work of the medium, the effect of the medium on your personality will be permanent. So in a way, we're doing this. We have the same principle in bhakti. So I mean, what I'm trying to get at basically is to try to understand the connection between that particular psychology, let's say, the psychology of theater, and the psychology of religion that Rupa Goswami is describing. So Rupa Goswami uses the terminology and the methodology of the Natya Shastra, but says we have to do this in relationship. We have to get the rasa from Krishna, Bhagavan, rather than from material things. So it's not just material.
There is the explanation of 4 different bhavs, right?
Well, the thing about theater, so, I would say that most devotees, when they read something like Nectar of Devotion or read one of these other books or Chaitanya Charitamrita, where quite often these different things are discussed, right?
Right.
You have, like, chapter 14 of the Madhya Lila is a good place to look. Or, the 19th chapter of Madhya Lila. Or in many places also, because Kaviraj Goswami himself was a poet, and so he was very familiar with the terminology. He was very familiar with the techniques of Sanskrit poetry. So these terms are often being used, but I don't think that most devotees don't quite understand them, because they don't understand the history of those terms, of those different bhavas, which come from Bharatanatyam Shastra.
Interesting detail. Yes.
Well, it's important, because if you don't understand where it's coming from, then it's very difficult to understand how it's being applied. Right? So we have these terminologies. We hear vibhavas and anubhavas, and Vyabhichari bhavas and Sattvika bhavas and Sthayi bhavas. So we hear all these terminologies, but exactly what's meant, we don't really, most devotees, I don't think, have a very clear idea. And nor do they understand why it's important either.
Can you do a definition of each of them or explain?
Sure. Okay. Well, I would have, if I were to explain it, I would have to explain it in two parts, because one part would be the tradition before Rupa Goswami, and then what did Rupa Goswami do with that same information? Let's say, how did he push forward? He's pushing forward the science. Let's say he's making new discoveries in this particular field, and he's making suggestions and giving new ideas that were not there before. And he's making, and so his whole arrangement of the subject matter is changed a little. It's changed somewhat. And the reason for that is because in the beginning you have 8 rasas, right? In Natya Shastra, you started out with 8 rasas. But there was a discussion about which of those rasas was the most essential, which one was the most important, right? So as you probably know, that in Gaudiya Vaishnavism we take Sringara rasa, like Ujjvala rasa, Madhura rasa, as being the most important. And not just that, but because it's the first rasa, let's say, that all the other rasas are understood to be expanding from that. But other people had different ideas. For instance, one famous statement is that rasa saras chamatkara yang vina naraso rasa. So that rasa has to have amazement in it. If you don't have so one of the 8 rasas is adbhut, right? It means the rasa of amazement, something like that. So if you're not amazed, he says you can't have any rasa. So that's why if you see something, even if someone comes and speaks very nice poetry and makes a nice film with all kinds of special effects and so on, the film can still be boring and not produce any effect on the consciousness of the spectator. So the point is that so you could say that the Natya Shastra was created in order to create a vocabulary for theater, by which people would know how to act, how to behave, or how to respond to particular stimuli, and to try how to create that, how to reproduce those effects in the audience that's watching, in the spectators. In Bhakti, we're kind of doing the same thing. Sorry?
What is the background? Is only created to show this part of art, culture, dance, or is something else? I mean, it is connected because it brings to my mind like that all this dance and this explanation about rasas and everything. Maybe it comes from the time of Radheshyam, for example, all the gopis, maybe because everything is about dance and rasa and everything. Is any connection there, like historical connection, or is?
Well, of course. I mean, depends how you look at the subject. But certainly you could say that since Krishna is the origin of everything, that he is raso vaisaha. So that rasa in the Upanishad, Taittiriya Upanishad, says that rasa is he. Right? So the supreme truth is rasa.
Yes.
So now that's an explanation. That's a different way of looking at the supreme truth. Yesterday in my class, I was saying to my group that so you have excuse me, what was I saying again? That
about the rasa, and that came from Upanishad, and it is stated that Bhagavan is the original rasa.
Okay. Yeah. So raso vaisaha. Well, the whole thing is, if you look in Bhagavad Gita, for instance, in the 10th chapter. So we were talking about the 10th chapter there. And we're talking about in the Bhagavad Gita how Krishna has what you call vibhuti yoga. Where Arjuna is asking Krishna, well, how am I to see you in the phenomena of the world? And Krishna tells him, well, then you just look at wherever there's a supreme, or wherever there's something that's extraordinary or extra special, there you should see my presence in that. And that it's not just in these particular examples that I'm giving. Right at the end of the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, there Krishna says, Bahuna kim, what is the point of me saying so many things? Kimetena tavarjuna, Bahuna gyatena, kim tavarjuna, ekanshena stito jagat. Right? That's just with the simple spark of my glory, I pervade the entire universe. So that's how we say. So if you take wonder or amazement as being the basic rasa, then you can see how Krishna is present in rasa always, because he's always the most. He is a manifestation of superior skill and miraculous events and the creation itself. So, but the problem is that we are, as human beings, we're not always conscious of those things. In your everyday life, you're getting up, you're doing things, even you're chanting Japa or whatever it is that you do, and you don't necessarily feel any particular excitement or any particular feel of wonder or surprise. Those things are not, we would like to have them constantly, those high moments, but in actual fact, they only appear from time to time. It takes an accumulation, a combination of events to produce that feeling. So that's why they say you have to have sthayi bhav, you have to have vyabhichari bhavas, you have to have anubhavas. When all those things are combined together, then there's an experience of rasa. So, like if you just if you're watching a movie or something, it doesn't necessarily, you're not going to necessarily feel rasa all through the movie. You might be feeling, you're being pulled, your mind is being pulled this way and that way by the different events that are on the screen. The rasa moment will come at the very end, at the conclusion. See, when the lovers are together and when the hero has won his battle, and all those kinds of things. Then you get then things settle. That is actually, let's say, the rasa that is being produced by the work of art in its entirety. And of course, you have all these other little things that are coming on in between. So the basic thing that everybody has to deal with is the sthayi bhava. Right? So the sthayi bhava, those are the permanent mood. So there says that there are 8 of these or 9 of these. This is in the original system. Right? So you have, what do you have? You have jugupsa, it's disgust. You have bhaya, fear. You have krodha, anger. You have vira, heroism. You have shoka, which is empathy or grief. And then there's adbhut, which is amazement. Then there's hasya, which is comedy, laughter. And then you have shringara, which is love. So all of those different things factor into any kind of work of art, of a theater or film or novel or whatever. And the point, and it comes to a conclusion. So you have, the main element there is the sthayi bhava. So these 8 instinctive feelings that you have, everybody has them. I mean, everyone has the potential to feel anger. You have anger within you, and maybe you have a lot of anger within you because of your childhood or your upbringing or the way that you've been conditioned by propaganda and by culture and society. So fear is another one. So these are all, fear is present in everyone, right? Everybody has fear. So the ability to stimulate your senses in such a way that you experience fear, that's something that can be done. Right? It's something that can be done. So you have the potential for that. So that potential, that's the sthayi bhav. You follow?
Yeah.
I mean, you could fall in love. If you watch a film and you see 2 lovers falling in love, beautiful girl, handsome man, hero, he's the one who is defeating the enemy. So, you get involved in the story and get involved in the activity. And so when the lovers come together at the end, then you feel some affinity for that. It's deep within your heart, you have some wish to experience that same thing in real life. And so you identify with that experience. And so you feel, you feel happiness.
Are the emotions synonym, is the word?
With
of bhav? How you can...
Okay. All right. Well, the word bhava, so the word bhava has so many meanings, it's very difficult to pin it down. And so often we give it a different translation in different situations. So the word bhava basically means a state of being. right? So you're in a particular state of being. So that could be a state of emotional being. So you have permanent states of being that are these 8 bhavas, and then these bhavas, when they're stimulated, then they become rasa. When it goes through a full cycle, let's say. So let's say, just give the example. So we use the example of anger, right? So now a good example. You're watching a film and you see, the bad man is being obviously played by someone. An actor is coming out. He's a monster. He looks hideous. He's doing bad things, and the hero is confronting him, and he sees that person, he sees that person doing something bad, and then he begins to feel angry. And you're also watching, and you're also beginning to feel angry because of this man, this evil man, what he's doing, the evil person. And so you in your heart, you don't want that to stand. And so you identify with the hero, and the hero goes into the battle. So these are the way the natural sense of justice and the righteousness that you have, that those are all awakened. And then it'll waken up in a man, especially it'll wake up the desire for heroic action. There's a famous example that's given that one man was listening to the Ramayana. And then when it comes to the point in the Ramayana where Hanuman jumps from the Kanyakumari to Sri Lanka, you know the story, of course.
Yes.
Right? So Hanuman is going to jump. He's looking for Sita, and so he jumps across the strait and lands in Sri Lanka, and then does all kinds of things there, right? So this is a great act of heroism, right? Hanuman is the personification of Vira Rasa,
yes,
hero, right?
Yes,
and serving Rama in heroism. So it said that there was a man who was watching this performance of Ramayana, and when Hanuman gets ready to jump to Sri Lanka, then he also stands up in the audience and jumps. Right? So he jumps. So this is the thing. This is what happens. You can see it. I mean, that's not such a stupid example. If your people are watching a sports event, for instance, and Ronaldo scores the goal or something, then everybody, when he's got the ball and he's running up the field or he's passing it or something like that, everybody stands up and everybody is, everybody's energy is, completely identified with his energy. And then when he scores, then poof, everybody is jumping up in the air like that, right? So this is how the process of identification works. That makes that makes a drama possible. So the first thing you have. So even I could use that as an example, because you can, in any kind of situation like this, you can look for vibhavas, anubhavas, and so on. They're all going to be there, right? So the vibhava in this case, for instance, is Ronaldo, right? So Ronaldo is the heroic footballer. I could give another example. Maybe not just because Ronaldo is the one who is more popular nowadays, but you can use anyone, Beckham or Pele or Maradona, whatever, like all the great heroes from the past. But the fans are identifying with him. So he is the vibhava, right? He is what you call the vishaya alambana vibhava. So those three, the first group of bhavas that we talk about are the vibhavas. So you talk about sthayi bhava at the beginning, you also talk about sthayi bhava at the end, but the acting on the sthayi bhava, the first thing that acts upon the sthayi bhava is the vibhava. So just like that, you have so there are three parts of the vibhava. You have alambanas, which are vishaya and ashray, and then you have uddipanas. Okay, so let's take the example of the football game, right? So there he's got the ball. So now suddenly all the people who are in the audience, they're identifying with him, right? They want him to score a goal. Yes. Everybody has become, all the people who are there, who are watching, they've all, they're all stimulated by his presence.
Yeah, right.
So that's a vibhava. So he's a vishaya alambana. He's a cause of the stimulation of the sthayi bhava.
The roots,
right?
Yeah.
So now so you have so in that particular case, so he's the vibhava, and who is the ashray? So in the ashray, well, in this particular case, because you could say that all the fans and all the other players. And they are the ashray. They're also participating with him in some way. It's a bit maybe a little more. It's easier to recognize the Vishaya and Ashraya in something else. And then the Udipana is that he has the ball and that he's running with it. And so we see. So now that's that particular situation. Maybe the score is 1-0 for the other team, and so that every moment now is very important. Or maybe it's 1-0 and there's only 1 minute left of time left to play, so that everybody is at the pinnacle of excitement. So that's those are all that situation. That's all called udipana. It's the situation that is sparking off the other elements.
Yes.
And so then when you see that, so then that's going to have, there are going to be other things that are involved, and so the two main ones are anubhavas. So anubhavas are going to be different, whether it's he who's doing it or the other players who are doing it or the fans who are doing it. Like an anubhava, goal is scored and people start dancing and jumping up and down. All their activities, those are all anubhavas.
Yes.
Right? Because it's like the anubhava is what? Anubhava means that there's a bhava and then there's anu, there's something that follows it. So there's something, so you're going to act in accordance with your inner feelings.
Right.
And so that goes together with vyabhicharis. So vyabhicharis are other secondary emotions that come in. And it's an interesting, the word vyabhichari is also interesting. It's got two names. One is vyabhichari and one is sanchari. So those meanings, they both have vyabhichari means comes in, both of them have the idea that the sanchari means that it's pushing the waves up. So the Sai Bhavi's example is of an ocean. And the vyabhicharis are like waves in the ocean. So let's say, for instance, you're watching that. So let's say the opposing player. Now I don't know any of the opposing players. Let's say one of the opposing players in the other team kicks Ronaldo and makes him fall. Right? What happens then? So everybody's going to groan. Everybody's going to start shouting and throwing things on the field. And maybe the people from the two different teams, they'll start fighting each other, depending where, of course. But anyway, there will be different anubhavas in accordance with the sentiment, because the sentiments will be that anger will become grown up. Disgust, disappointment. All these different other emotions will come into play. So those other emotions will come, but they'll be temporary. They'll stir your feelings up, and then after the situation and the game starts again, and and then you go back to a more normal state. But that doesn't mean that the overall theme has changed. The overall feelings and the overall rasa hasn't changed. Right?
In this topic, for the ones who are watching and listen all this explanation that are coming from outside the Gaudiya Vaishnavism or the Vaishnavism, and they had a background, for example, as I study for some time Buddhism, and all about these bhavas and all these kind of different emotions, to say, are just a creation of our mind and are exactly the main point of our suffering and attachment to this world. Basically, many people can say that how this can be any spiritual if this is what is making all the problems and the karma indeed. So how to explain this for that point of view?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that that's not the Gaudiya Vaishnava view, right? The Gaudiya Vaishnava view, of course, we agree. Everybody, more or less since the Buddha, and even before the Buddha, everybody agreed that the dukkham, the first thing you have to understand is that material life is one of suffering, and so then you look for the causes of that suffering. So the thing about the Vaishnava position is that the universe is real, and that it's an expansion of God's energy, and that it actually is meant for God's pleasure, and that happiness and distress, that the happiness and distress that we experience in this world, that it's not in itself the cause of suffering, but it's the consciousness of God and the relationship that we have with God that is the real defining factor for happiness. Right? So now the only thing that what happens, what makes, so you have different theisms. So these kinds of things are stated in most theistic religions, right? That you're going to say that they'll probably say the same thing. You know, if you're a Christian or a Muslim, they wouldn't deny the reality of the world, because the world is a place where one is, where God has put us into the midst of his energies for some purpose. And the purpose is rasa. Right? The purpose is rasa, because when we come into contact with God, then we experience rasa. So now the important thing is to understand how rasa operates. We have rasa in theater, and then we have the rasa in bhakti. So there's a distinction that's being made, that if the sentiments that are being created are in relationship with Krishna. Now, like an example I was giving of the football game, right? So now, if I say raso vaisaha, then your experience there also is also an amazing and wonderful experience of Krishna's energies, and you're getting to see Krishna's energies being manifested in a particular brilliant way in the person of Ronaldo. Okay, I don't know, I'm saying, giving Ronaldo too much of an example, but I used to say that as a joke, you know. So if I said in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, for instance, that well, what does he say? It says, Vrishninam Shankaras Chasmi. All right, so, you know, or you know, whatever, that, you know, that Adityanam Aham, anyway, Vasunam Apyam Chandra, I forget all the ones that are in the 10th chapter. But Krishna says, I'm the best of the stars, I'm the moon, you know, like of the, and so on. So, of mountains, I'm the Himalayas, of bodies of water, I'm the ocean. So he says each time that there's something, he says. So we could also say that in our common experience, that the best of all football players is Ronaldo, right? So when you see, so whenever you see the best or the supreme of anything, then in a way you're seeing a spark, you're seeing a partial manifestation of Krishna's splendor. So if you're saying, if you look, of course, you look at Ronaldo and you feel admiration for him, but deeper than that is your admiration that you have for Krishna, who is, let's say, being partially revealed through the activities of Ronaldo, which produce amazement and rasa in you. Right? So when you see something amazing, you see someone running, you know, like so fast, or, you know, someone fighting a crocodile, or, you know, or a bear, and beating, you know, some kind of manifestation of extraordinary skill or intelligence or strength. All those things. Well, we have the 6 things, right? When we talk about Bhagavan, Aishwaryasya, Samagrasya, Balasya, Yashashaksya, Jnana Vairagyayascheti, Pranam, Bhaga Itiriyate. Right? So these are the 6 bhagas that we have in Bhagavan. So that's one particular thing that we can look at. You know, wealth and, you know, strength, fame. So knowledge, so you have these different characteristics that can be seen, and you can measure them, and whenever you see some extraordinary measure of those things, then you're moved to think of Krishna. Now the whole point is that then from that point you can, you know, the actual idea that you can directly experience Krishna. So you can actually directly experience. So the direct experience of Krishna, we identify it with rasa, right? Because you have 2. All right, let me go back to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu here. So I'm trying to explain everything all at once, which is a bit of a bother. But in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, there's the 1st chapter, and then there's the 2nd chapter, the 3rd and 4th, right? There's 4 sections in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Everybody who has not read Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it's a very important book. Right? So the 1st chapter, the 1st section, which is called the Eastern division of the ocean of Bhakti Rasa, that explains Bhakti in a more, you know, in the way that we're more familiar with, right? This is why in the Nectar of Devotion, or in Bhakti Hriday Ban Maharaj's translation of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that really all the importance is given to the 1st section, because it talks about sadhana bhakti, you know, it tells you take initiation from a guru, take shelter of a guru, you know, it tells you all to do all these different things, 64 activities of sadhana bhakti. But also what that 1st section it talks about sadhana bhakti, and then it talks about bhava bhakti and prema bhakti, right? You know this, right? So you have the 1st the first chapter, there are 4 chapters in the first section of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. The first chapter is general qualities or glories of bhakti. And then the second section is on sadhana bhakti. The third section is bhava bhakti, and the 4th chapter is prema bhakti. So now, what's interesting here? So here, let's see, this is maybe where the idea springs from in the first place, because the word for bhava, the bhava is being used in the theater, in the Natya Shastra, and now here bhava is being used also in bhakti. That you have a bhava bhakti. So now, when we talk about bhava bhakti, what does this bhava mean? It's also considered sadhya, right? It's the goal, because you have sadhana bhakti, and then you have the sadhya bhakti. You have the bhakti that you're trying to attain. So the bhakti that you're trying to attain has 2 manifestations. One is called bhava and one is called prema. So prema is considered greater than bhava. And why is that? Well, if you line it up, if you just put a parallel lines with the Natya Shastra, right? So Natya Shastra also has sadhana, right? There's a sadhana involved in for most of the people who are talking about this, that sadhana is a cultural thing. It's something that you cultivated. So something that's cultivated, just like we say Krishnanushilanam. So there's a Krishnanushilanam. There's also an Anushilanam for literature. So if you want to read Rupa Goswami in the original Sanskrit, you're not going to be able to do that without having a considerable amount of education and a considerable amount of knowledge and understanding of the entire Sanskrit poetical tradition and the Natya tradition and the dramatic tradition. All these things are a part of the Sanskritic culture. Right? So I mean, even if you look at, for instance, Rupa Goswami, I mean, you know, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there in the first chapter of the Antya Lila, when Rupa Goswami comes to, is it the first chapter? I think it's the first chapter. In the first chapter of Antya Lila in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Rupa Goswami comes to Puri, right? He's staying with Haridas Thakur, and then Mahaprabhu comes and he finds the verse, right? He finds this famous verse, you know, that Soyam Krishna Kurukshetra Militas Hamsa Radha. You know, the verse where Rupa Goswami wrote his pastiche of the famous, you know, verse that Mahaprabhu was chanting, and nobody can understand why he was chanting this verse in front of Jagannath. So Rupa Goswami understood that. So then when when this, you know, inspired Mahaprabhu, he asks Rupa Goswami about the plays, because he's been writing the Lalita Madhava and Vidagdha Madhava. He's been preparing that play. In the beginning was only one play, right? And then later on he divided it into 2, because when he came to Satyabhama Pura, Satyabhama told him in a dream that he has to make 2 different plays. So at any rate, but what happens there in that chapter, the way that this is, of course, Kaviraj Goswami's presentation, right? Puts everything together, that he has Ramananda Rai and Swarup Damodar and all the other big shots, all the other, you know, like, you know, because Ramananda and Swarup Damodar, these are also very advanced, you know, Swarup Damodar was a singer and a poet, and Ramananda Rai had also, you know, written his Jagannatha Ballava Natakam. And for many people, it's Ramananda Rai who kind of gave the, you know, is really the ultimate source of this entire kind of thinking about theatrical rasa, because of his play, right? Because of Jagannatha Natakam. At any rate, those 2 come there, and what happens is that you know, it's like Swarup Damodar, Ramananda Rai, and Mahaprabhu himself are a panel of judges, and they're looking at the doctoral dissertation that's been written by Rupa Goswami, and they're examining it and they're giving their judgment. And so there you have some very, you know, both Swarup Damodar and Ramananda Rai, as well as Mahaprabhu himself, they're all completely blown away by and Haridas Thakur is also there, you know, that hearing the verse about the holy name, and he's also getting impressed. So everybody is there and they're getting impressed by, and these are not just ordinary people, these are people who have deep knowledge of the tradition, deep knowledge of the Sanskrit language and the poetic tradition. And Rupa Goswami himself wrote, collected verses, right? Like the Padyavali. The Padyavali was a collection. So these Padyavali, all the verses in Padyavali, except for the ones that Rupa wrote himself, he collected. And some of them are collected from very old books, and some of them are collected from more recent, poets that he knew himself, or from just, the immediately preceding generation. Some of them were people he knew himself, and others were, lost in the tradition. Mm-hmm. And he didn't even take everybody. He just, he didn't take, for instance, Karnapur. I mean, he didn't take Bilbamangala, and he didn't take Jayadev, and so on. He didn't take the verses that were already well known. He took the ones that were more less well known. But the thing about what he did was they were all about Krishna. He was particularly selecting verses that had been written about Krishna. Or sometimes what he did was he would take a verse, an old verse, and he would make some change in it to make it about Krishna, just like he did with Yakomara Harak that this verse, and the same kind of idea that he did with Soyam Krishna, that he took a traditional verse and just somehow or another he changed it so that it was about Krishna, so that he would make it about Krishna. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's sort of what I'm saying, is that this culture was there already before in the previous writers. They were already talking about it, and that's why you could say that the idea that there's a spiritual dimension to theater, this was already being cultivated for a long time, and you get some people stating it very explicitly. Because of the tradition. And for instance, like in Jagannath Puri, the temple was it was the Devadasis who performed Gita Govinda every night for Jagannath. They danced and they performed it, and it was very elite. Nobody could go in there. There was just the performers, no audience. Just the only audience was Jagannath. Right? So they would put on that performance for Jagannath. But even though not everybody was getting to watch the performance inside the Garbha Mandir, everybody in Orissa would already have known, the Gita Govinda. The Gita Govinda would have been something that was a part of the general culture.
Yeah. Yes.
So most of that is a question of language, linguistic education. Sanskrita. The word Sanskrita means purified, that your language is purified. It's just like if someone speaks good English, then they'll speak grammatically correct English, and they'll use good vocabulary. And same thing with Spanish. That if someone is educated, then he'll speak Spanish with the proper grammar. He'll use good words. And maybe even fancy words, and maybe even fancy ways of making it longer. Famous ways of insulting, for instance, is a great thing. Say,
in terms of this, how then is the stage of material world, this universe, as a stage for Dharma, as we spoke in the very beginning, or a stage where Krishna shows his pastime? What is the meaning of this, or how to understand this?
Yeah, okay, well, so now you have to know your Bhagavad Gita here in order to understand a bit how this is developing. But Dharma, for instance, if I say that theater is meant to teach you about Dharma, right? So this is normal. This is why even there's one verse, a famous verse, that says you should, if you're watching the Ramayana, you should identify with Rama and not identify with Ravana, right? Because if you identify with Ravana, then what's going to happen? So nowadays, of course, in films and so on, you have, like The Godfather or whatever, they make the bad guy into a hero, right? Somehow or another. Even in India, in South India, in the Tamil Nadu area, and they think that Ravana is the hero and Rama is the villain, because Rama came and conquered South India, conquered the Tamil area. So they think this is imperialism and so on, and that we should have reparations. But basically the idea is that there is some kind of a natural tendency, let's say, in human beings to identify with the heroic and with the good and with that. And when you're watching some story or film, that mostly what it tries to do, or what it ends up doing, is to inspire you to be a good person who will act heroically in the face of danger, who will use anger, fear, and disgust in order to combat, in order to stand against them and to stand for, because if you have the Vira Rasa, so Vira Rasa has Dharma Vira. So what is a Dharma Vira? So you've heard this is a Dharma Vira. So a Dharma Vira is someone who's going to do the right thing no matter what, right? So you'll see a Dharma Vira. Well, if someone comes and says, I'm going to give you $50,000, you just, do this bad thing. But the Dharma Vira will say, no, right? He'll say, no, I have my principles. I have my I know what is right and what is wrong. Right. And I will even sacrifice my life to stand up for the righteous thing. So, if you watch something like this in a film, of course, you're hoping that the hero will survive, but he's setting that example, right? He's in, Bhima or Arjuna or Yudhishthira, or Krishna himself. They're all acting as individual heroes, and you're watching, Arjuna. I only see the eye of the bird. I don't see anything else, right? This is an example of Dharma being taught. Right? That's the Dharma is being taught. So you're seeing this and saying, now if I'm going to shoot my arrow, I have to, focus. Right. So you have that. So there's a lesson that's being taught. So of course, in a society where less people are literate, these things would have been very important. People coming to the, in a village, you have a certain time of the year when there's less work. And so the wealthy people in the village, for the benefit of the villagers, right, you have to give them some entertainment, or else they'll start, getting frustrated with their material condition. But what you're doing is you try to inculcate certain positive principles, right? So what's going on there in the Mahabharata? What's going on in the Ramayana? And these are such important books because they have the most dharma that is there. Yeah. And even if you look at the it's really the same principle in there in the Bhagavatam. When Vyasa and Narad Muni are talking there in the beginning of the first canto. So Narad Muni, well, he says, you're not satisfied because you've written all these other scriptures and you've taught so many kinds of religious principles, but ultimately you haven't taught the basic, most important, and the thing that counts the most, which is devotion to the Supreme Person, right? So when he does the Bhagavatam, then the Bhagavatam is also the same kind of principle. Now you have to see how this all ties in with the Bhagavatam, because the Bhagavatam is the first scripture really that starts to talk about rasa in the way that the poets would have known it, right? Muhura ho rasika bhuvi bhavuka pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam. There he's making a promise that this Bhagavatam will give you the highest rasa. Tadeva ramyam ruchiram navam navam tadeva shashvat manaso mahotsavam tadeva shokarnava shoshanam rinam yautama shloka gunanavarnanam. So there he's saying that you're going to, in the Bhagavatam, with the story of Krishna, you're going to get something that's the most pleasing, something that's the most ever fresh, right? This idea of adbhut, this idea of wonder. If it's nava, right? If it's always never new, that means that it's every moment there's something that's more exciting, something that's more revealing. And in the connection with God, expect that God will reveal himself to you, and by your openness. Really what you're trying to do is you're trying to create an openness. The sadhaka is trying to create an openness in himself to see Krishna everywhere and all the time. So that's all these different techniques, the techniques of bhakti or the techniques of yoga. They're all to get you to be in touch with the supreme truth at all times. Right. Now this is just another different way. This is like when we say, okay, so when you're talking and you're arguing with someone about the existence of God, and someone says, I don't believe in the existence of God, or I don't believe that God could be, that you can see God as a human being. Well, now this is the whole thing. What this idea of rasa means that this is only possible when God is a human being. Like when God Krishnera Jateka Kela Sarvotama Nara Lila Nara Bapu Tahara Swarup. There's a Gopa Vesha Venukar. This kind of thing. That Krishna is that Krishna as a human being. This is the ultimate form of God. This is a very confusing.
Or maybe in other words, it's like the higher taste of rasa is there in that form, because also for the ones who cannot even see God in a form, also I think that is correct to appreciate that they experiment some ras on God, even if it's formless, like Brahman, for example.
Well, now that's so that you're bringing up an interesting development, right, in the Rasa Shastra, because the first thing that happened, they had 8 rasas, and then this 9th rasa, somebody suggested that Shanta is also a rasa. Shanta is also a rasa. So what is a Shanta rasa? So Shanta rasa, and I explained that the first 8, they were all instinctual, right? That you have some natural tendency to anger, let's say. That when it's being provoked, then you can become angry, or fear. If you're provoked, you can become fearful, like that. So the theater or I've been using, product, some art product or some entertainment product. Entertainment. I mean, I think entertainment is the best idea.
Krishna is using Ronaldo now, so everybody is part of this. As an example, now Ronaldo is part of the example for understanding Krishna. So
yeah, well, he's going to be, yeah, well, I mean, the whole idea is there because you haven't seen Krishna, but you've seen Ronaldo, right?
Right.
So you haven't seen Krishna, but you've seen that. Here I am, fat man, sitting in my chair all day long in front of the computer, and there is this human being who is capable of doing, of jumping in the air, putting his feet way up in the sky, and hitting the ball in such a way that it goes exactly into the precise, part of the space that's not being protected.
Yeah.
Something that and actually nowadays, I think with the internet, you're seeing more and more people doing more and more extremely
incredible
amazing things. But of course, there's more to it than just that, because the human beings are, not just let's say athletes or something. There are more, these 8 rasas, and especially when you think about the love, the importance that madhura love, that the love of a man for woman, the importance that has in human psychology. You can't almost imagine. Can you imagine poetry or theater or without, love?
Without madhurya, it will be dry.
It would be completely. It would be nothing there.
No.
So you have basically the heroic, which is kind of the man's proving himself, like that, and then the attainment, the prize of his heroism is to find love in the world.
But let's get back. Sorry to interrupt. Let's get back to Santaras.
Yeah, okay.
You mentioned this. What they are saying about this? What is the view they have about?
Okay. Well, I'm very sorry that I don't have, I've been trying to get this a graphic to illustrate my point here. But if you think of that you had some people. So basically, what you came down to, what happened was in this historic discussion, it was that some people are saying that that Abhinavagupta and these other people, mostly from the Shaiva tradition, what they call the Kashmiri Shaiva tradition, they're saying that the one rasa that is above all the other rasas, the one rasa that encompasses all the rasa, is Shanta rasa, right? Because Shanta rasa is and this is philosophical, it's a culmination. So he felt that Shanta rasa was that Shanta, that Nirveda, this is an important word here, this is the Nirveda, that this was something that also became a Sthayi Bhava. Now, it needed to be stimulated, just like with the Buddha, when the Buddha came out of the palace and saw an old man, saw a person who was diseased, saw a person, he saw the miseries, birth, old age, disease, and death manifested in front of him. So when that happened, and he asked his father, he said, well, is this going to happen to me? And his father didn't want him to know that, but he said, yes, this happens to everybody. Doesn't matter who you are, whether you're a prince or a king or a god. Sooner or later, you're going to become old, you're going to die, you're going to have disease, and so on. So then what happens is that when that knowledge comes into somebody, then his psychological makeup is transformed. He becomes hopeless. He recognizes that there's no hope for happiness in this world, right? And so that's a particular sthayi bhava. That's the sthayi bhava that's called nirveda. And when one has that sthayi bhava, then one also becomes a hero. One can become a dharma vira of this, following this sthayi bhava. So it's also heroic. Right? So you have a heroic story. So like even the story of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, let's say, or stories of the great saints. We like to hear the stories of the great saints because these are stories that are more or less in the Shanta rasa. He hears about the misery of this is the thing. He hears about the misery of the material world. He understands that no matter what I do, nakritam kritena. This is the thing. Pariksha lokan karmachitan nirvidya. Where he says it nahi akritam kritena. You cannot attain liberation from karma by karma. You can't get free of the material life without through works alone. So his adventure, so then he has to go, says tasmad guru prapadyeta. So go to a guru then. Samitpani. Brahmanishta. The verse comes, this is the idea that comes along. So once you have gotten to this sthayi bhava, then you continue on the path, the heroic path of attaining knowledge, of attaining liberation, of attaining the Brahman. So now in what happens then, so you have Brahman being one ultimate goal of all the rasas, and the other one is Madhura rasa. So they're like competing. They're competing as being the ultimate end goal of heroism. We're talking here about the heroic tendency. Every human being, especially men, but more men than women, that every man has the desire to be a hero. And why is that to be a hero? To achieve, what's been given to him in this human form of life. If a man isn't a hero in his life, then he feels as though he's failed. He'll come to his death, and if his failure in life will be determined by how much of a hero he has been, whether he has acted bravely in the face of in the face of threat, in the face of fear, in the face of disgust, in the face of anger. Has he been brave? Has he done the right thing? Has he behaved according to the dharmic principles? Right?
And
so, anyway,
of course, the definition of dharma is on Shastra, but dharma is changing time to time according to Bhagavad Gita and the Das Avatar, for example, or all the avatars they bring and they introduce a dharma who has like a new flavor to say. Dharma in Krishna or Narasimhadev or Gauranga Mahaprabhu is kind of different in somehow, right?
Yes, but what they're doing, you could say that it's according to the psychology of the human society at a particular time. So that's why you have this idea of according to time and circumstance that the teaching comes. But you have, let's say, if you look at it in evolutionary terms, the basic principle is going to remain there. But according to the human situation, the situation in human society, the way that it'll be expressed will perhaps be a little bit different. But there's something instinctual in a human being that makes him respond to the telling of stories, because the telling of stories, has rasa in it. And even a story, and each story with its moral and with its its particular message will be ultimately teaching a message about Dharma. So let's say you're watching a film. I'm using film, examples from modern culture. But let's say you have a film about this American Psycho is a very famous film. I don't know if you know about this film. But American Psycho is really a very dark, black film. There's nothing redeeming. Watch this film and there's really nothing in there. The main character in the film is a murderer, and there's nobody who is a hero who is defeating him. He is the main character in the film. And in many ways, he behaves in such a way, like in a sociopathic, psychopathic way. And that is current. That's why it's called American Psycho, because he's living there in New York and he's a businessman and he's doing all this, but he has no moral compass. His only morality is the pleasure of the moment, to do something, to experience for the moment, and to do things that give him a thrill, which includes murdering people. So in such a case, you're seeing the film and you're going, what would be the rasa in such a film? Well, the rasa in such a film would be bibhatsa, right? There would be disgust and would be horror, that you're seeing that a human being could be degraded to such a level. They could be such a demon, could be such a low. So for what happened?
Experience some rasa, yeah. For some reason,
so you're going to experience the disgust. So, but what will that disgust do? It won't make you, for 99% of the people, 99.9, nobody's going to follow that psychopathic character, but they're going to be so disgusted by him, they'll say, but if there's anything I don't want to be, I do not want to be like that. Right. So that's how you see, that's called vyatireka. You've heard these terms, anvaya and vyatireka, direct and indirect teaching. So the anvaya is when it gives you a positive example. The vyatireka is when it gives you a bad example, and you deduce, you understand, well, I don't want to go there, right?
Yeah. And there is one interesting study and idea in psychoanalysis, in the line of Jungian psychoanalysis, that they say exactly that art, like horror movies, for example, or horror comic books, whatever expression of art that is showing these kind of things and working with this energy. For example, erotic magazine or comic books, that someone can do some things that maybe I cannot do, but people who watch this, even if they think I will never do this kind of thing, like murder, like in a cartoon or in some comic book or stuff, but still there is the pleasure of seeing that somebody's doing. It's like I take the role of the character that is there for 10 minutes or for half an hour, whatever the series is on TV, but still is part of it.
Yeah, well, that's of course that's a vicarious thing. Jung is also very interesting, but if you can understand everything that I'm saying in Jungian terms quite easily, because Jung is talking about archetypes.
Yes.
Right. So he is, for instance, the whole idea of the hero. There's Joseph Campbell wrote a book, I think, which is called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. So he has detected this heroic idea throughout mythology and throughout history and throughout literature everywhere. You have to have this because why? Because a person who's reading it, they want to have that heroic sentiment stimulated in them. We want to have that, and we want to have it for good, right? We don't, there are a few people who are, yes, it's true. What you said was exactly true. It's very true, because why there's so much violence in the films? There's something in there that there's something violent inside us that wants to be stimulated, and we want to get some vicarious pleasure, second pleasure. But the idea that, and this is why I've had this kind of discussion also, because about archetypes, and because archetype means that you have okay. Now we're talking about. Let me go back to Rupa Goswami, okay?
Yes.
And so now Rupa Goswami, we're talking about these 8 rasas, and then now we had this 9th rasa, which is Shanta Rasa. So when that Shanta Rasa comes into the picture, then people start discussing, the more spiritual dimensions, going beyond just ordinary dharma, and start trying to understand, human life, the theater or literature is meant to represent human life in some way and to uplift the human personality and uplift human consciousness. So now this is, as this develops, you want to understand, well, what is behind all this? What is behind all this? So you want to have both Shanta and you want to have the Shringara or Ujjvala rasa at the same time. This is really what happens when you have Krishna. You have the Shanta rasa because it's all the material negativity has been removed, and at the same time you have the positive aspect of human love and human interaction and relationships. So what Rupa Goswami does, Rupa Goswami says, and I've got a diagram of this, but I don't have a good Pakka diagram that's a graphic, which I really want to have. But if you think of it, that Rupa Goswami, now if you think of it as a circle with 5 points, okay, or rather with 4 corners and then a center point, right? And then you have like a cross. So a cross is there, and you have the 2 ends of the cross, and you have a point in the middle where the 2 lines cross each other, right? So now you have on the left side and on the right side, you have Shanta rasa and you have Shringara rasa, because those are, and then, but Rupa Goswami says that these are actually love. This is love in a broader sense, right? That love is not just Shringara rasa, that love is not just erotic love, but there are other kinds of love as well. So you have love so you have the love of a child for the parent, the love of a worker for his employee, the love of a friend for a friend, or the love of a parent for a child. These are all, these are in the middle, right? These are in between. So you have the erotic and you have the Shanta. So in order to, if you look at it this way, that in order to experience the Shringara rasa, you have to have knowledge and experience of the other 4 rasas. Right? So it's just to say, if you say that there's a Sthayi Bhava, is, because now in the devotional world, you say that you want to have a Sthayi Bhava and you have an identification in relationship to Krishna, that you're either a Manjari or a Sakhi or Kanta, whatever your particular relationship happens to be in Madhura Rasa. So the devotees are all trying for Madhura Rasa. But then they discount the other rasas, right? Now Krishna is not without Vatsalya. Krishna is not without Dasya. Krishna is also, Krishna is also experiencing Shanta rasa in some way. So you have all these different kinds of relationships.
Right.
So now this is what Rupa Goswami, let's say, discovered, or what Rupa Goswami brought into the system. This was not talked about before Rupa Goswami. He says that really that rasa lies in the relationships that we have with other people. And that rasa is produced, if you're watching a film or a play, that the rasa is produced on account of the particular relationships that are going on in the film, right? So the father and the child, right? Or the mother and the child dies. And so you're identifying with the mother, with whose child has died. Exactly. And so you're feeling shoka, you're feeling empathy, and you're feeling grief along with her, right? So now that's possible. So this is possible for everyone. This is not just possible for someone. If you say, "Oh, now I'm in Majjari Bhav, so I don't experience that feeling." Well, if you don't experience that feeling, then you won't have a complete psychology. You won't have a mature psychology. And so, if you don't have a mature psychology, then how are you going to understand Madhura Rasa?
Yeah.
Right?
So we'll explain also that Srimati Radharani also, she experiments different rasas and different bhavs. That all the bhavs are on here. Like motherhood, for example, with the gopis and manjaris. Also friendship, and all the rasas are present there. It's not like one exclude the other.
Yeah. And it's not just, well, I mean, we have to also understand the difference between the Siddha Deha and the Sadhaka Deha. Right? So now you're, as a human being, right, whatever you're thinking about in the Siddha Nitya Lila, right? As an ordinary human being here, you're a sadhaka, and you're also going to be faced with the same kinds of challenges that the Buddhist monk was, and so on, about your relationship with this world. Right? How are you going to deal with this world? Yes. Well, in Krishna Bhakti, we're not denying this world and say, "Oh, just become a sannyasi." Saying the idea is that you have these different relations. You can't really understand rasa unless if there are a whole section of Krishna Bhakti in India is Vatsalya Rasa, right? Where they go around with the little Gopal deity, and they treat the Gopala like their own child. They have that Vatsalya Rasa. So now that's an aspect, let's say, of human personality that is being given attention to and is being given importance to through the culture of Krishna Bhakti in that particular lila. So what I'm saying that if you want to experience Madhura Rasa in the Krishna lila, but in this material world you avoid the idea of relationship with other people, especially in this case for devotees, it means relationship with other devotees. If you haven't been able to cultivate loving relationships in this world, in accordance with the system, that psychological that mapping that Rupa Goswami has given of five particular rasas.
Right.
So those five particular. So, in other words, the culture of divine rasa is connected to the culture of material rasa also. Because you can't divorce Krishna from human life.
Right.
You can't divorce Krishna from human experience.
Jagadananda, will you agree that our relationships is what I am hearing from you, but I want to confirm this openly. Do you agree that the relationships we have and the experience we have in this world with the work, with the family, everything, is a reflection, maybe small particle of the real ras, but it's a reflection of the spiritual ras, or is nothing connected and totally opposite to what is the spiritual reality?
Yeah, well, of course, I mean, you have, well, obviously I take the first position rather than the second one. I think that, of course, both aspects are in a way connected, because a person who's engaged in the world might not be able to maintain that consciousness. Whereas a person who's divorced from the world, he doesn't necessarily get the benefit of what it means to be engaged with devotees. Now, I mean, the thing about devotees are people, right? So if you're going to get married, you're going to want to get married to a devotee woman. Or if you're going to have a child, you want that child to be a devotee. If you want the parents, you want the parents to be devotees. So you want to be engaged in a community where all the different relationships are relationships with other devotees who share a common consciousness of Krishna and who share a common practice. But at the same time, you're going to get emotionally involved. If you have a child, you have that child, and you're going to, now I've got the responsibility, just like Yashoda and Nanda have the responsibility for Krishna.
Yes.
You want to make, like Mother Yashoda, Mother Sachi, Chaitanya is in the dirty dishes, he's in the garbage dump, saying like that. So she's got to give him a good talking to and give him a lesson. But why is that? That's an anubhava, right? We were talking about anubhavas before. It's an expression of her love.
Yes.
It's not that she's doing it because the law is more important. She's doing it because, the child has to, because of her maternal feelings for the child and the desire to see that child grow up and to be, a human being in all the fullness that's possible for humanity to achieve.
Right.
So that sentiment, so the thing about bhakti is about sentiment. Bhakti is about feeling more than about intellectual. So in the Gita, you have that 10th chapter where he's giving intellectual. So okay, look at it like this, that Ronaldo is the best of all. I am Ronaldo amongst football players.
Yes.
So if he's giving you that intellectual way of looking at it.
Yeah.
But if you're living life and you have you have a wife, you have children, you have parents, you have friends. This is in the devotional community. You're experiencing all these different things, and sometimes you're experiencing happy relationships, and sometimes you're experiencing unhappy relationships. But if because they are devotees, just like your guru, you're told to see the guru as God, right? So the guru is, what does it mean to see the guru as God? It means that your relationship with him is one manifestation of the particular relationship that you have that is equivalent to your relationship with God. All right? So your parents, so to see God as the Father, to see your parents, to see the presence of God in your father, that your father, whatever his defects may have been, right? That somehow or another that he was instrumental in providing you with this life whereby you can become a devotee of Krishna.
Fantastic.
So now if you as you become a mature human being who is psychologically mature, who is emotionally mature, then you become worthy, right? You become worthy of entering Krishna's Leela. You become you're engaged in a kind of a practice of training practice to be worthy of Krishna Leela, to understand all the intricacies, to understand all the psychological intricacies of love, and so on. So if you're going to become, to be a devotee, that means to be, to become expert. And to become expert in what area? You want to become expert in you can't become expert in football like Ronaldo, right? But you can become expert. You can become expert in your own life, at least when it comes to the opportunities that you have to love, and to be able to do them in such a way that it increases the universal happiness because it is connected to Krishna.
Fantastic. Jagadananda, have been an incredible journey all these 90 minutes we have been here. Of course, many questions are arising, and I will really be happy to have you aboard again and discuss about these topics.
Just let me say one more thing,
yes.
because I want to, and I've written about this on my blog also, you can see there. But this is the idea of Madhyam Adhikari. You have Madhyama Bhaktas, so you have Kanishta, Madhyama, and Uttama, or Prakrita, Madhyama, and Uttama. So this is in the 11th canto, right? This 11th canto, second chapter, I think. Right, so there where he talks about these three kinds of Bhaktas. So now we were told, and we should know it very well, that we're actually to be Madhyama Bhaktas, right? So the characteristic of the Madhyama is what? Ishvare tadadhineshu balisheshu drishatsucha. There's 4 kinds of relationships that are talked about. So now just try to understand, we're already talking about relationships, right? And rasa in relationships. So the Madhyama Bhakta is the one who is actually starting to cultivate bhava. And the previous, the Prakrita devotee is only worshipping the deity, right? On the altar. So he doesn't actually have engagement with other human beings. See, another human being is going to surprise you. Krishna is not, the deity is not going to surprise you so much. Maybe he'll surprise you sometime.
Maybe.
But most of the time, you're following a regulated activity. You offer the deity something, and you take the prasad and so on. And you may pray, and you may talk to the deity in so many different ways. You may cultivate a personal relationship with the deity. And all that's okay. That's all Prakrita.
Yes.
Because the whole point is that when you have, that you're not really being tested. You're being tested. You're going to be tested in your human relationships. You're tested in your relationship with other devotees. You're going to be tested in your relationship with your guru, for instance. The guru is going to be, you're saying, oh, you got to see the guru as God. And then the guru will do something that just, oh, boy, I can't think of this person as God. And you have, and you're faced with a test, and you're faced with a challenge. So the Madhyama Bhakta, this idea that I'm talking about here and that you were just asking about, this is really something that is being cultivated on the level of Madhyam Bhakta. And then people should not think that they can go right away to Uttam right away. Uttamadhikari, where you see God in everything and all. There are a lot of people who kind of say that. Oh yeah, well, intellectually you may have reached that understanding, but practically speaking, nobody can do it. You're not going to do it because you can't do it without having passed through the middle stage.
Of course, it also depends a lot of what you did also in your previous life and so on. So, because the journey is quite long. Yeah.
Okay, well, next time we do it, because this is in my. You can give the link to that article, which I just.
I will give the link for this material.
So this is, just this one article, because in a lot of these things, I mean, it's intense because it's coming from it's the kind of the summary of 3 different approaches to bhakti rasa, or 3 approaches to rasa, but seeing all the details that they put in there. There's a lot of information that's in those. And if one has a bit of a grasp of those things, it makes it a lot easier to understand what Rupa Goswami is trying to do and what's going on in the Vaishnava Rasa Shastra.
Fantastic. I will leave the link for this material in the description of this video, so everybody can go.
There's that one. I mean, there's a ton of stuff on my blog about this kind of material.
Indeed.
But this is a good place to begin.
Very good.
Okay?
Thank you very much. Dandavat pranams, Jagadananda Das. Thank you very much for this time.
Jay Sri Radhe, Jay Sri Radhe.
Jay Sri Radhe. Radhe Radhe Radheshyam.